Hello everyone, and welcome back. It's day 3. I apparently am still doing this. um, I was thinking just now about how so I've been trying to get myself back into a routine. It's one of the ways I've been recovering from my pain flares and from grieving and from generally everything 2020, as I've been trying to have more of a schedule that I can keep to. I know it really helps me balance things. And I've had this hump that I've had to get over. So I know I talked the last couple of days about how my week runs Thursday to Monday, my work week. And so what I've been trying to do is make sure that I keep to a set schedule on each of those days, so I don't study too little or too much, or work too little or too much, or not rest enough, or all that sort of thing. That I sleep at the right time, because that kind of went out the window when my pain was really bad because I couldn't get out of bed, so I stayed in bed sleeping, and all that sort of thing. And I've realised that the hump is Saturday, that basically what happens is I get through my weekend. By the end of the weekend, I've rested a bit, I have a bit more energy. I go into Thursday and I knock Thursday and Friday out and I'm doing okay. And then Saturday is generally the day something goes wrong. So like I'll wake up in more pain, and I'll realise that it's really bad and I need to stay in bed longer, or I just won't have the energy to do anything, that sort of thing. So I'd like to point out that it's 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I've been up for 2 hours. I've already done some studying, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And I'm really tired. I think I look quite tired. I'm very, very tired, but I really am, like that sort of reinvigoration I talked yesterday about having, I've still got today. And it's the fact that I still have that despite the fact that I'm in a lot more pain this morning. My left hip is particularly bad. My left hip is one of the parts of my body that gets worst when my pain flares. Oh, it's nice to be able to mute easily so I can cough. So my left hip gets bad. My left knee is a bit bad as well. I'm going to try and be a bit more careful today. I think probably I've sat in the same position. So my chair is like quite a nice chair. And I've got things like I've got an egg sitter. If you've been on Twitch, you might have seen an egg sitter being used, which does help, sort of helps me when I need to sit up a bit better. And this is a standing desk, so I can stand up if I need to, though I found that hasn't actually helped a huge amount when I'm in pain, because I can only stand for so long. So I'm hoping that this is a really good sign, and that, I'm due to do another couple of hours of studying. Obviously, I'm doing this as part of it. But I've got a few things I want to do, potter around with, and it's lovely to be here and doing that, and to be excited about it, but to be accepting that. So like I tried to write a little bit in the past hour, and I got a few words, but it didn't quite come. So I've done some sorting of other things I've written. What my aim today, and I'm going to start doing it so that we don't, miss it, like I have the past couple of days, is I'm going to talk about what my dissertation is. So my master's degree, whilst my research focus is in the medical humanities, my master's degree is actually in creative writing. I did change course at one point, and I didn't think to change to the medical humanities master's, and I should have done. I was originally on a course where you did a term in Paris, and my pain flares started very badly, and I realised I wasn't going to be able to do that, and I needed to be here to get treatment. And so I switched course to the one that was just at my campus in Canterbury, and then the pandemic happened, and I was very glad that I'd done that. I know people who were worried they were going to get stuck in Paris. Obviously Brexit also was happening, and I went to meetings when I was still on that course where they were like, we don't know if you're going to be able to get to go because visa things might happen. You might, like, suddenly your British passport might not be enough. And so yeah, it was, I'm in awe of the people I know that did go because it must have been so stressful. But yeah, I didn't end up going, and I do wish that I had changed at that point to the medical humanities course. I would have been eligible for it with the modules I was taking, but I didn't. And so I'm here doing a creative writing dissertation. Now I've sort of talked about this a bit on my blog, but just a sort of a quick rehash. I love writing. Writing is the thing that I turn to in times of need. It's the thing I do that comforts me. I am constantly reading, constantly writing. It's a huge part of my life. And I hate studying it. I've had some lovely teachers. I've had some I haven't been happy with. I've had all of my classmates have always been lovely. I've had some good feedback. I've had a lot of bad feedback. I've struggled with a lot of, so a lot of what I write is fantasy fiction, and I was the only person writing fantasy fiction in both of my fiction classes. And that was very difficult. And I had my teacher the first term was absolutely amazing. And I went to her at one point and went, I'm writing stuff that I think you, not her specifically, but you as in the general university want me to be writing. I'm not writing the stuff that I care about. She said, would just write, you're here to write what you want to write. Don't worry about what anyone else is doing. And we had this amazing talk, and I ended up submitting part of Oracle and then got bad marks for it. I mean, I've got a pass, but compared to, so basically in all of my fiction classes, I've only just gotten a pass. In all of my other classes, which have been medical humanities and illness and disability, academic style classes, I've gotten high distinctions. So you can definitely tell where in there my interest has ended up lying. I've spent a lot more time, and in fact what I did in my spring term is I said, you know what, I am not here because I want to do the creative writing bit. I'm just going to submit something. I'm not going to worry about it. I didn't read the feedback because I read the feedback for my autumn term submission, and it was really horrible because it felt very, I think the problem with any sort of having any sort of creative writing marks, and I'm sure other people had this experience as well, I don't think it's particular to me, is that you being marked on it is very different to receiving. So I've received edits and critiques of my writing before, and I've been okay with that. And I've gotten used to accepting that. But having someone say, this is only worth a 50 or 52, 53, whatever it was I got, was really unpleasant. And one of my markers was a teacher who I don't think he's a terrible teacher. I think we just have very different approaches and interests. And he said things to me like, I don't understand the point of action scenes. I think they're purposeless and don't tell you anything narratively, which is something I really disagree with. I think fight scenes, like a lot of the scenes that are often critiqued for being purposeless, like fight scenes, sex scenes, things like that, can really communicate things about the characters. And I think a good writer can do that. Not that people who don't write combat scenes are bad writers. I don't mean to go that way either. But I definitely don't think it's right to blanket say that fight scenes never communicate anything, because some of my favourite scenes in, like, you think of any of Brandon Sanderson's books and you look at any of the fight scenes like in Mistborn or in the Way of Kings books, and you can learn so much from how someone is fighting and what they're fighting for, and why, and all that sort of thing. So that still makes me angry thinking about it. So anyway, the reason I'm telling you all of this, and the reason this is relevant to my dissertation, I promise, is that you're going to have to bear with me because I've got to think of a month in 2020 and when something happened. I want to say February or March, but I am not sure which. In one of those months, which are the months where Grandad was in hospital, so I really don't remember time very clearly in those periods. I know I did everything, but I don't really have a clear memory of it. I had to submit my dissertation proposal. And you submit your dissertation proposal, which is like just 300 words. You're not completely held to it. You can change sort of what's in there, but what they use it for is to assign you a supervisor. And I was terrified of getting this teacher that I really hadn't gotten on with as my supervisor. But I hadn't, because of everything that was going on in my life, I understandably hadn't sorted out getting a supervisor that I liked. And I put my submission in, which at that point, as I talked about yesterday, was that I wanted to write about the benefit system and living in the benefit system with mental health issues. And I do really want to write about that at some point. It's genuinely something I've touched on it in my blog, but I've never fully sort of dived into it because it's such a big thing, and it's one of those things you can't talk about in a small way. You've got to sort of go over all of it. And so I put that in, and I put a note on it saying, I'm really sorry I haven't been able to speak to anyone to arrange supervision in advance. But I'd really like someone from the medical humanities cluster to work with me on this because I'm talking about issues of illness. And I really lucked out because I got my secondary supervisor for my PhD as my dissertation supervisor, in part because of the style I'd asked to write in, because she was the one in my medical humanities course who had shown us this particular style, which is one of the things I've retained in the topic I've changed to. So the style is, it's basically a hybrid style. It is a mixture of creative and academic writing, but different types of creative and academic writing too. So what I'm producing and what I've been working on is a mixture of fiction, prose, poetry, both based on fiction and non-fiction, creative non-fiction and sort of narrative non-fiction, general academic writing. And there are some amazing works that I've read that my supervisors recommend to me that blend these so beautifully. One of the first ones I read, I wrote an essay on for my medical humanities course. I wrote an essay on women and chronic pain when my pain flares were starting, which was very topical. And also, it turns out if you are in extreme pain, don't research pain. Because if you spend 6 hours a day reading about chronic pain whilst you're in pain, it's not fun. I'm really proud of the essay I produced, and it got an amazing mark. But it was I definitely both did and didn't help myself by picking that topic at that time. But yeah, so I came away from that really amazed that this style existed, because I've always felt that I enjoy writing in a lot of different styles, and I've never quite worked out how to mesh them all together. But the thing that really struck me when I was reading, I'm going to remind myself what it was that I was given to read so that I can tell you the actual name of it, because there was one book in particular that made me go, oh wow, this is really cool. And it was on a very different topic, but it was, what I really wanted to do. Threads is the book. And the way they moved seamlessly from one thing to the other is they just didn't care that they were swapping between academia and poetry. Good morning. And they just did it. And they didn't feel the need to, because what I was worried about is how do I transition from one to the other? And I felt like I was going to have to build this into it and put work into it. But in fact, you just stop with the poetry and start with the academia, and then you stop with the academia and you start with the fiction, and you just change and you trust the reader to come with you. And I found as I was reading it that I really appreciated that trust in me as a reader, and that really made me enjoy it a lot more. So that's the sort of style that I'm going to be writing in, and it fits really well because my topic is role-playing, especially live-action role-playing, but not only live-action role-playing, just sort of role-playing in general, and the idea of pretending to be someone else as a source of self-healing. And the freedom that gives you, and the skills it gives you, and the problems that there are with that, and all of the issues that surround role playing generally. And I picked that because I knew it was something that would make me happy to write about. I would have been happy writing about the benefit system as well, but it also would have been digging up a lot of trauma. Whereas this is really digging up the things that have healed me. And I think that's a thing that I need to, it's a good thing for me to be digging up right now and exploring. And so I've done a lot of reading about role-playing and theories of role-playing. Obviously it's a relatively small field, like to the extent that I know several of the academics in the field because they're all LARPers. And there's very different traditions in different countries. If you know anything about role-playing, you'll know that Nordic LARP tradition, very, very different to UK LARP tradition, which is very different to US LARP tradition, even down to how events are held, what costumes look like, what standards of costumes there are. We've all seen like the film representations of US LARP where they've got swords that look, are like this thick, like they should be in WoW or Final Fantasy or something, and they're just like some foam on a stick and they look awful. And it doesn't represent what LARPing can be. Not that realism is necessary, but that their style doesn't doesn't hold that realism. I realise I'm talking about realism in fantasy worlds, but you sort of get what I mean. The getting close, reducing the amount of suspension of disbelief. And there's some really interesting theories around comparing. I'm going to keep looking at my notes because I want to remember how they worded it. It's something like the suspension of disbelief versus the upholding of belief, and the idea that it's not that you're suspending your belief that there's someone there holding a sword made of foam. It's you're upholding your belief that they're a bandit here to rob your kingdom or whatever, and that you just change the emphasis, and that radically changes your understanding of it. No, my handwriting is too like, this is what my handwriting is like when I'm note taking, so there's no way I'm going to find that quickly. But that's the general idea, is that just by changing how you think about it, you can really radically change your concept of it. And that's something I've enjoyed playing with in studying the medical humanities and thinking about how medicine and the humanities sort of intertwine or don't, and how we conceive of them and how that impacts the research that we do. And I could go on about that forever, so I'm not going to let myself, because we're talking about my dissertation. So I've got 4 main categories that I'm dividing this into. My dissertation has to be 12,000 words, because although I'm including fiction and poetry and academia and so forth, because the bulk of it realistically will be some form of prose, be it narrative nonfiction or academic or fiction, I'm assuming that I'm right to use the fiction length, which is 12,000 words, versus the poetry length, which is a certain number of pages. I don't actually know off the top of my head how much it is, but it would seem disingenuous to use the number of pages when I know I've got like lines of dialogue, which obviously takes up a lot more space on a page than a poem might do. So I'm working on that assumption. So generally, and this isn't hard and fast, this is a vague, I have about 3,000 words per section, and 3,000 words goes really quickly, especially when you're combining forms. One of the things I've been doing is, because I've got hundreds of thousands of words of fiction I've written about role-playing characters, as anyone who's ever role-played with me will know, because they've almost certainly had me go, hey, I wrote a thing, and then I've thrown 20,000 words at them and they've gone, oh wow, this is big. So I don't have any restraint when it comes to role-playing characters. So I've been looking through like bits that I want to take from that to help show, because what I aim to do is to show my experience of healing and the experience of healing one can have through role-playing, through showing my development and the character's development, like sort of in a coherent way with each other and simultaneous to each other. So I've been picking bits of these writings that I've got, which meant rereading them all, which was lovely. I had a lovely morning just rereading all of my writing. And I want to put too much of it in. earlier this is what I was doing, part of what I was doing this morning after I struggled with writing a bit, is I went, okay, I've got like a 10,000 word piece that is the backstory for one of my most important characters. I think she is my most important character I've ever played. And I went, I obviously can't use all 9,500 words of this because that's basically a dissertation in itself. But I genuinely believe it's one of the best things I've ever written, so I really want to include it in some way. And I was like, right, I'll take some fragments out, and I've taken 2,500 words. So I don't know how I'm going to get this to work exactly, but I've got until November, so there's lots of time. And I think the important thing is to start pulling out the bits where I'm like, no, this is a part that's really indicative of something I want to say about the character. And I think then as I construct it over time, I'm going to go, oh, hey, there's that bit when, and I can take that bit and use that bit. So it is helpful, even if I'm not going to use all of it. But yeah, so and those threads of those characters are going to run through all 4 of these sections. So the 4 categories I've got are personal identity in terms of role-playing and the development of your personal identity through the identity of characters that you create. The culture around role-playing and the sort of meta-level relationships you have and friendships you build and culture that you're in as a role-player. Then sort of similar to that but a bit more focused is the intertwining of role-playing with relationships and how you can form stronger friendships with people out of character by forming strong friendships in character and having almost like an emotional connection where you don't have the the basis isn't from you as people, it's from that emotional connection you already have, but it is from you as people at the same time. And I really want to explore that and sort of talk about how that works. And then my last category is the concept of reality and how that relates to role-playing and what things are real and not real. And I think there's some really interesting things to say in there because role-playing, LARPing, does directly come from tabletop role-playing as its sort of legacy. It's a legacy of that. And obviously tabletop role-playing began primarily with Dungeons and Dragons, and then there was the moral panic of when Dungeons and Dragons came out, especially in America where it originated from. And LARPing has inherited part of that legacy inherently as a result of just coming from there and using a lot of the tropes that are present in there. And so that's a very interesting thing to think about because I think a lot of our concept, even amongst the role-playing community, of what's real and what isn't real is based on very old concepts that come from that time of moral panic. It's really interesting reading the academic literature around it, which is the majority of what I've done thus far, because as I say, I've been working myself slowly back into it so I don't burn out, is that obviously there's lots, whilst it's a small academic community, there's still a lot written about it with lots of differing opinions, but basically everyone goes back to citing this one book from 1983, which is by a guy called Fine, where he outlines the different frames of role-playing, and it's things like there's the frame of the world that your characters are in, there's the frame of the rules of the game that you're playing, and there's the frame of you on the sort of out of what you consider the normal out of character level. And it's really interesting that it's had a lot of critique as well, but people still fall back on using those frames and terms like magic circle and sort of the equivalent of what in theatre you'd call the fourth wall. And the social contract of role-playing has a lot of language around it that is repeatedly used, which is really interesting in a field where the name of the field itself is so different depending on what you're reading. So I know friends who will insist that LARP is an acronym that is just LRP. I know friends who will put the A in it, and I know people who will just use it LARP as a word, not an acronym. The Nordic tradition uses LARP as a word, not an acronym, in a lot of academic writing from what I've seen. Then a lot of other places will use LARP as an acronym. I think in the US it's more often LARP as an acronym with the A, and in the UK it's that or without the A. And then it's really interesting because people have such strong opinions on it. And that actually persists into the academic field as well. But yeah, so I have on my board where I've got, that's where I keep looking over there, I've mentioned this before, I've got a board for each category, and then I've got all like post-it notes up on it with the thoughts I've got, and I've got a quote for that section from a book I read actually for my PhD called Madness, Art and Society, which is reality is a performative, relational and interpretive practice, which I really like in terms of role-playing, because yes, it is, like, reality is relational in that context, because I think this is one of the things I've actually managed to write about thus far, is the idea that if I run up to you dressed as a peasant screaming, my liege, the enemy are here. I have literally run up to you dressed as a peasant screaming that, but we both know that you're pretending to be a monarch and I'm pretending to be a peasant at the same time, and we are accepting the reality of our pretending, and we are upholding the belief of that reality of our pretending. And this is why I think it's so interesting to talk about. And I think it's not something that you know how sometimes when you start thinking about things on a meta level and you look at some philosophy and you're like, I don't really understand how this is relevant. With role-playing, it really is very relevant, and quite directly so, and it's very interesting to think about that. So that's broadly what my dissertation is an exploration of role-playing as healing by analysing both my own experience and sort of recounting my own experience, and also thinking about how role-playing works as a whole and in general. And I still don't quite know how that's all coming together, and that's the thing that I'm sort of working on now, is I'm in this weird nebulous stage, which is I think the hardest bit. There are bits of researching that I really like. I really like the sitting and reading. I don't like when you haven't started and you don't quite know what you're looking for yet, because that's scary. But I like the bit where you've started to find some threads and you just go sort of running off, following all of them. And one of the most frustrating things is that I can't do that to the same extent, because I can't go to a library. Because even though our uni library is now open, I'm 2 hours from it. I'd have to take public transport to get there, and I'm chronically ill. So I am avoiding going out as much as possible, because whilst I don't have specifically immune conditions, I am, not well. So my immune system isn't as good as, even though I'm not fully immunocompromised, I'm probably partially immunocompromised. So that's very frustrating. I've been lucky to find a lot of stuff digitally. I'm really lucky that Nordic LARP have a tradition of self-publishing for free all of their academic works. So what I'm planning to do after this is go through and read some of those. I've got like full book PDFs to start working through, so I'm going to do that. And I think that's my aim for today, tomorrow and Monday, is to do a mixture of poking at some writing and doing some more reading, doing some general. So I have an obsession with notebooks, which has been discussed before, and I have. So this is my PhD notebook, which also has become my general medical humanities research notebook, like stuff that isn't related. So I've got my medical humanities notebook from my courses separately. But anything like outside of that wasn't directly for class has then gone in here, because it's generally related to my PhD. So this, you can see this bit is all the notes I've done. And if I turn this round, you see where that bookmark is. That is how far into this I have digitized my notes, because I prefer handwriting my notes when I'm taking them, because it makes me process things better. But then I want them digitized, because when I come to, and I've read a lot of sort of tips on doing a PhD, and one of the main things is, oh God, digitize your notes so you can search them. And I sensibly went, okay, I will make sure I do that now so that I get in the habit of it. I digitize all of my backlog, and then I can just digitize like on a weekly basis. I'll go through and digitize all of the notes I've made that week when I get into my PhD. But I have a lot to catch up on, and I've done quite a lot of catching up already, and there's more to do, and I think I need to get back in the habit of just doing like one text worth of notes each day, and I'm uploading them all into, and maybe one day I'll talk about all of the tools I'm using for this, because it's really interesting and there's quite a lot. And I'm happy with the one I've ended up using, so but it took me I tried a few different ones before I got to this one. But yeah, I think that is where I'm going to end today. And it always feels weird because I go from talking. The thing with talk, like, it's different to streaming games because you often sort of like go gently towards the end of your stream, whereas this is just me talking, so it's just me going, right, we're done now. But yeah, so we are, because it's been over 30 minutes and I've explained my dissertation. I actually succeeded at doing it. So we will see what happens tomorrow. I think tomorrow my focus is probably going to be just showing up, because I have managed to show up today. If I can show up tomorrow and Monday, which is my Friday, then when I go to mentoring next Thursday, because I missed Thursday this week because of being at the conference, I can go to my mentor and say, hey, look, not only did I do this conference, I did all of the week of studying. And also I need to at some point email my dissertation supervisor again, because I haven't spoken to her in a month. But then technically, if I was on the standard timeline, this would be the start of the term. I would only just be starting. So I'm not behind at all. It's not like I should have emailed her and haven't. But it feels nice to, because she's been really supportive, especially with where I've had to change everything and the fact that I'm taking the extension. So she's stuck with me for another 3 months. And also she's lovely. Both of my supervisors are amazing. And I miss being at uni. So any contact I can make with people is quite nice. But yeah, that's where I'm going to leave it for today, because otherwise I'll go off on another tangent and we'll be here for an hour. And I will see you all tomorrow. If I can find, there we go. This is a professional operation where I definitely knew where my mouse pointer was to click this button.